the next really progressive thing I guess he did was the funeral home. And the way he got into that, he had two cousins. One had a funeral home in Monterey, and the other one had a funeral home in Livingston. And before funeral homes, people would come in and buy and, build a box and bury their people that way. There was no such thing, of course, as embalming or anything. And I remember the reason the Cub Cemetery started in Overton County was because the Allred Cemetery was across the river where the Allreds had been being buried, but when the river was up, you couldn't get across, and yet you couldn't hold a body for days at a time until the river went down. So they started the Cub Cemetery. All of that to say that that's what's when. Before people had funeral homes, they built their own caskets and laid out the family member that had died and buried him, soon. One of the cousins that lived in Monterey started a casket factory where he built, I'm sure it was just a rough-hewn wooden box with material on the outside and material on the inside, but he talked Daddy into carrying caskets in the store. And Daddy had a long warehouse building on the side of the store with a separate spot at the end of the warehouse, and it had shelves, and Daddy stocked the caskets in there so somebody could come in and buy a casket just like they could a pair of shoes, and that went on for a while. I don't know how long. I remember playing in the caskets were sold with a wooden box, and I can remember playing in the casket boxes and hide and seek when they were stored over in our garage. I'm sure all that is very light. My memory may not be completely good on all of it, but that's what started it. And then they started funeral homes, and embalming came along, and Uncle Clarence said he would go to the school to become an embalmer, and he did. And Daddy and started a funeral home then. It was operated out of the warehouse for some time until Daddy bought a piece of property and turned it into the funeral home. But that also was a sign of progressiveness, and that he was willing to expand and take that kind of responsibility on. But we were the only funeral home in Jamestown in Fentress County for a number of years. The one thing I remember so distinctly about that, there was a mining accident in Wilder, and 7 men were killed. And the funeral home had to try to handle 7 bodies at one time. As you can imagine, that was tough. And I remember coming home from grammar school and going down in the basement and looking, and I realized there was a body in the basement, so I left in a hurry. But they had no place to put that many people, and so they had put that man there until they could get around to it. But what a terrible thing. But you don't think about it. 7 men at one time with a mining accident. Well, I remember Mother rendering lard from the butcher department at the store. They'd take the fat off of the meat that they were selling or whatever. I don't know where she got it. I presume that's where. And cook it in that until it turned into lard. How that happened, I'm not positive. But not only that, it was good for all kind of stuff. boiling clothes, because that's what you used to do to get them white, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, it was a useful device, and I've got it sitting on my patio, which I find incredible. It was so different from the kinds of other stores that were there in the town, and people questioned in many ways if you could come in there with overalls on, if it was going to be too fine for the ordinary person to come. I mean, this must have been happening at first, but I remember Daddy saying he kind of had to work against that to show, no, it wasn't too fine. It was for people's convenience and that kind of thing, and up to date. It also had wooden floors in it that you oiled, which I always found intriguing. They had to be oiled I don't know if every week or not, but I remember he had a spray thing that you put down this oil on top of this wood to preserve it some way, I'm sure, and to keep the dust down and all that kind of thing. I don't know. Then he got a furnace, and the big warm air furnace with the big tubes that went into the store, and he had fans that sat up there that were about this big square, and they were electric. And but I can remember having to go back and put coal in that furnace too. Well, let me tell you about kittens and my first venture at selling something in the store. They used to have little penny bags, paper bags. They were about this big and about this tall and just about this big on the bottom. I can remember Kitten and I popping popcorn and filling those little bags up and taking them to the store and selling them for a nickel. That was our first business enterprise. I'm sure Kitten wasn't much help, but we sold them. And I don't know why I remember that. Mother and Daddy were not only active in the business world, they were also civically active. Daddy was mayor and alderman a number of times. They were active in their church. And in fact, Daddy was on the building committee that built the Methodist church that's there right now. And Mother was in the Eastern Star and in the garden clubs and all of those things. Daddy's friends were Wright Frog and Judge Case and Rollin Case and the Gurnts, part of the Gurnts, and of course Mr. Shapiro, and they were always so good to Daddy. They were the ones that helped Mother go to the hospital when she was expecting me and I was having difficulty. They took me to St. Thomas, where I was born, and Daddy told about taking me back in a couple of years when I guess they were expecting Kitten. And he said when I went in, the nuns at that time wore those big, beautiful, starched white, like wings, headdresses. And Daddy said, I saw them coming and I'm reaching for them and saying, pretty, pretty. And she said, the nuns took me away and just kept me for a long time, showing me around there that I had been born there. And now why I remember that, I don't know. But I've always been cognizant of those beautiful winged headdresses that the nuns wore. Mother was there a lot because she had difficulty with having children. And both Mother and Daddy were probably tubercular at the same time. Mother's lungs were so scarred, she said every time they took her x-rays for insurance or anything, they made her go through all the things again, and they both were. And consumption just almost wiped out that valley, Overton County Valley, down Three Forks where they were from. Oh, to read your genealogy and see how many died from it, you know, and well, grandmother, Nicey Looper, Daddy's father and his brother died within 5 days of each other. and it was from consumption, and they were both, what, in their 30s? And so it was, and Ernest Allred's mother also, she died with it. And a lot of people, it was terrible disease, and they really didn't know how to treat it. Now, Spurgeon had a doctor that sent him west to get to a dry climate. I don't know how he was smart enough, because that was not I guess not a known thing. But he was a student at the University of Tennessee with Ernest Allred, and when they discovered he had consumption, and he went to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and lived out there in a sod house, and but recovered enough that he sent, and his mother and sister went out there to live, and he lived in Colorado, and ultimately became the general manager of the Great Western Sugar Company. And Ernest, of course, Daddy's other first cousin, became the head of the agricultural school at the University of Tennessee. He was also president of the Genealogy Association here. And the three of them loved to get together and talk about family and go visit old people and cemeteries, and infected me with the disease. Someplace along the line, this doctor was supposed to have developed a shot for tuberculosis or consumption. And so Dr. McDonald came to Jamestown once a month to give Kitten and me a shot for it. And every time we had to take a shot, and they must have hurt, we got a silver dollar. Daddy gave us a silver dollar for taking the shot. And we accumulated 30, how many did I say? 38 silver dollars, and bought our first piano with it. And that was always nice. It was, of course, an old upright, and we had it until I got the grand piano when I was 16. I got that because Mother told me if I would be able to play and sing a certain song, that she would buy me the best piano she could afford. And I accomplished that. I'll have to try to remember what they were now. But then I did Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor on my college exam, so I was always kind of pleased with that. Mr. Lyon lived next door to us when I was little. He had a gorgeous baritone voice, and he would sing The Holy City. And I had heard it one time, and I went up and asked him what it was to please, where could I get a copy? And he told me about it, and that was the song that Mother said if I could sing well, she would buy me the best piano she could afford. And that was when I got the grant. And then I was only 16 years old, which was phenomenal. But then I progressed. We went to Ward Belmont, and then Mother heard that this Metropolitan Opera star had to leave New York because of his sinus trouble, and he was teaching at this girls' school down in Florida. And I left Ward Belmont. We moved down there, and he was great. He thought I could do anything if I would just try hard enough. My piano teacher thought I was trying to go too far ahead of myself, and she wasn't going to let me learn Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor. So I came home Christmas and memorized the whole first movement, and it bothered her. She said I had gotten way too far ahead, and I had really messed up some of this stuff. But I can still play if my hands would hold up. I can still play Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor, which was a real accomplishment in those days. And I was encouraged by my parents, and the way I started singing was kind of interesting. I was just, going to church and loved singing all the hymns that were played and everything, but the Methodist minister came over to Mother and Daddy and told them that my voice was good enough that it should be trained and that I should get some instruction somewhere. And that's when they started trying to find a music teacher that taught voice too. We were already taking piano, of course, but and that kitten. We were going to have our piano recital down in Nashville. Now, Ollie Shapiro had gotten us into this too. There was a music teacher down there that she wanted Mother to take us to. So Mother drove all the way to Nashville ever so often for us to take voice and piano. Do you realize that was in the days when there were no interstates? There was a little windy two-lane that went around Chestnut Mound. And Mother did that at least once a month just to give us music lessons. We were supposed to have this recital at the Andrew Jackson Hotel in Nashville. And we were going to do the Dance of the Demons, which was a duet. Well, Kitten had the easy part, just the bass. But I had all the little stuff like this. And Kitten wouldn't practice. I would practice till my head was off, but not Kitten. So I'd pinch her and get a spanking for it. Oh, she was a mess.